True Murder.
It's a rare insight into a killer's tortured mind.
The most shocking killers in true crime history.
Victims were brutalized, shot, stabbed.
And the authors that have written about them.
Bundy, Dahmer.
I would also play with Yash, like if you play with Sam.
The Night Stalker, BTK. Every week, another fascinating author talking about the most shocking and infamous killers in true crime history. True Murder, with your host, journalist and author,
Dan Zupansky.
Good evening. No body means no crime, which makes this the perfect murder. Doug Stewart even has an ironclad alibi. He's been seen hundreds of miles away when his lovely wife Venus vanishes. What better plan could any murderer hope for? But Doug's forgotten one thing, the power of a mother's love. Venus's mother believes her daughter's husband lured her outside. They fought, he won. Venus's mother wants her daughter back, dead or alive. Never Forgive, Never Forget tells the true story of a woman whose fear of her husband seems to turn out to be justified. It's also the story of a mother's quest to win the return of her child, her best friend, even if it's only to bury her. The disappearance of Venus Stewart is a shocking true crime story that rocked Southwest Michigan and eventually the nation. Hundreds of volunteers spent thousands of days searching for the mother of two young girls. The police and her mother were sure Venus's husband killed her, but he was in Newport News, Virginia, when the crime was committed in Michigan. The neighbors saw him. He used his credit cards and even paid on his account at his lawyer's office. And it wasn't just the day that Venus disappeared that her husband was seen in Newport News. He was spotted the next day, too. How can anyone be in two places at one time? Here's something else. No corpse. That's right, the police don't have a body. How can investigators even be sure Venus is dead? Her mother had to wait more than 8 long years before finding out what happened to her child. A community rose up to stand by Teresa McComb and her mission to learn the truth. And after searching for Venus hundreds of times, they stood by Teresa at the very end. Never Forgive, Never Forget, a shocking true crime story, is a hard-hitting tale of a mother's undying devotion and love for her child and 2 police officers' refusal to give up. It's a story that you will never forget. This gripping book will also leave you with a question. If you were Venus's mother, could you ever forgive? The book that we're featuring this evening is Never Forgive, Never Forget, a shocking true crime story, with my special guest, journalist and author, Rod Kackley. Welcome back to the program, and thank you again for this interview, Rod Kackley.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome back, and congratulations on this extraordinary story.
Thank you. It is quite a tale, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Let's get to the introductions right away with Venus Stewart, her husband, Douglas Harry Stewart. And this is 2010, but previously you write about their marriage when he had married Venus in 2002 and their life in Schoolcraft, Michigan, not far from her parents' home. Tell us about their marriage, their children, and their parents, Therese and Larry McComb, and how Venus ends up living with them. Tell us about the court petitions and their marriage and the background on Venus and Douglas Stewart.
Okay, Doug, as you said, Dan, Doug married Venus in 2002, and they settled down in Schoolcraft, Michigan. They had a home not far from her parents' home. 2 daughters, Brooke, who was born in 2004, and Rachel, who followed her older sister in 2006. Now, the Stewarts' marriage teetered on the edge of a nasty divorce in 2007. Venus accused Doug of being violent in court. 3 times she petitioned for protection. 3 times she pleaded for help. In fact, the last time on the last petition, she scrawled the word HELP, H-E-L-P, at the bottom of the petition in big, bold, frantic letters with the number 2 pencil. When that failed, that's when she left Doug and went to the girls and went to her parents' home, the McComb's home, the home of Larry McComb and Therese McComb, not far away in Colin Township. Southwest Michigan, by the way, is a very made up of small towns, a very rural area. Everyone knows everyone. It's just a typical small town existence there for Venus and her kids at her parents' home.
Now, we talked about the court petitions, and now she was fearing for her own safety, but she had also made an allegation regarding the daughters, 3 and 5 years old.
Yeah, she accused Doug of molesting one of the girls. There's no other way to put it. She really made a lot of allegations against Doug. Now, Doug is kind of the all-American guy, though. He's an ex-Marine, a lot of friends. Everybody loves this guy. But Venus is saying there's a whole lot that they don't know, including a charge of molestation.
Now, he's familiar with the area, even though in-laws live there, but he had prior worked in the area, so he's familiar with the area. And then you take us to April 25th, 2010. What is Douglas Stewart doing, and where is he on that day?
Right now, Douglas Harry Stewart in this story is driving north through Ohio. He's on the Ohio Turnpike. He's in a silver Dodge Ram pickup truck. It's been a tough drive. He's been behind the wheel for almost 10 hours straight, and he still has 2 hours to go. At least that's how he feels. Now you have to look at this from Doug's point of view, I guess. He feels he's on a mission. And remember, he's an ex-Marine, so his life is all about mission-centric. He needs to complete this mission. He is out to right a wrong. Not just one wrong in his mind, but a lot of wrongs. He thinks that Venus has been lying about him. She's been telling everybody he's violent, that she fears for her safety. She even has gone to the cops to try to get them to get him away from her and the children. That's what really bothers Doug the most, is the daughter, losing the girls. She has no right at all, he believes. Venus has no right at all to do what she's doing. So he's on the Ohio Turnpike. It's late at night. He's been driving for 10 hours, has another couple of hours to go. Finally, he pulls off at an exit. And there he sees a Walmart store. Now, he goes into the Walmart store and he gets some supplies because, again, he has this mission. He knows what he's going to do, or at least what he wants to do. So he goes into the Walmart. He picks out a tarp, dirty pair of work gloves, a new baseball cap, and a shovel. Then he pulls out his credit card and uses the credit card as a register to purchase those items, takes them all back to his truck, gets back in the truck, back on the turnpike, and he's headed into Southwest Michigan.
At that Walmart, what's noted, I may be a little jumping ahead, but what's noted at that time was that he also had an unusual request along with the things that he purchased. What was that unusual request for?
He wanted to get lime. He was looking for lime. And what do you use lime for? Anybody who watches, a gangster movie knows that's the way you want to get rid of the body, to make the body disappear. So he really has everything he needs to make the body disappear.
You take us to April 26, 2010, and the beautiful Venus Rose Stewart, this mother of 2 small children, is just in her pajamas and slippers. It's not too cold out, but tell us what she's expecting that day, why she's even outside.
Yeah, it's April 26th, and April in Southwest Michigan is one of those times when you really never know what the weather's going to bring. You might start your day in pajamas and slippers and then have to put on a heavier coat at the end of the day, or it might be reversed. She's going out in the early morning. There might be a little light snow coming. She's going out to get a package that she thinks might be coming today. As a matter of fact, she's expecting it because a delivery driver called to make sure he had the correct address and directions. And at this point, Venus and her kids are living with her parents, so she could use some good news. She's really looking forward to getting this package. She walks out by herself to the mailbox. Again, this is a rural setting, so she's walking really to the street or the road in front of the house to see if the package is there.
When she goes out towards this mailbox, which is at the edge of the property, it's not right attached to the home, she spots a truck that she's very familiar with.
Yeah, she sees the silver Dodge Ram. It looks like Doug's truck. She's really afraid. She has said before, too, that in one of those restraining orders, she wrote, "I'm tired of living in constant fear, and I'm afraid of what this is doing to my children. I'm scared to death, and every day I live in constant fear, and I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when he will appear again." Well, then she looks over to the side and sees that silver pickup truck. It looks just like Doug's truck. She knows the vehicle. She knows who's driving it. And even worse, Venus knows why it's parked in front of her parents' home. Suddenly, the quiet of the early morning, the dew on the grass, and the privacy offered by this rural neighborhood isn't as reassuring as it once was. She glances to the right, to the left, and back over her shoulder. None of the neighbors can see her, and worse, Venus knows none of them will hear her. no matter how loudly she screams. Instead of the mailman with a package, Doug is waiting for her, her estranged husband, and she runs. He chases her, grabs her. She fights with every ounce of muscle, every fiber of her soul. Venus is battling for herself, for her kids, for everything, but she can't hold out. She just isn't strong enough. Doug is an ex-Marine. He pulls her into the truck. There he grabs her by the back of the neck, squeezing her carotid artery hard, like a vice, until she loses consciousness. Her last thought, please, Lord, referring to her girls, please, Lord, keep them safe.
Now, you take us quickly to a person named Colleen Bateman, and she works in an attorney's office and in Newport News, Virginia. And you say Newport News, a city of about 180,000. So it's a big place in comparison to Colon, Michigan, certainly. What does she observe that day and note?
Yeah, she looks up. A man is walking into the attorney's office where she works. A beautiful day in Newport News, Virginia. Now, this is where Doug has made his home after they split up, after he and Venus split up. It's a beautiful day, and she looks up, and there's a man coming into the office. She thinks it's Doug. Looks just like Doug, but he's not saying much. Actually, the guy says nothing at all. He just gives her a slight smile and hands Colleen an envelope with the name Doug Stewart written on the front. That's not unusual. Doug is a client. Colleen returns the smile, opens the envelope, and inside there's a $100 bill. She doesn't know Doug that well, but she's seen him in the office before, and she tells her boss that a client is waiting. Him showing up, though unannounced, isn't all that surprising either. Doug's making a payment. This is what he does to pay off the attorney. Now, not all clients do this, but Doug is doing this. But she looks at Doug again after checking out that $100 bill, and she sees the man is wearing green cargo pants, a hooded sweatshirt, and aviator sunglasses. He's also a little bit smaller than she remembers Doug. And Colleen thinks to herself that Doug never wore clothes like that when he came into the office. Cargo pants and hoodie would actually be very out of character for him. Doug's always nicely dressed, you see. Office casual, I guess is how you would put it. And he always walked with a military bearing. I mean, military people, when they make their career in the military, they do have a different way of walking and holding themselves than civilians do. This guy with the envelope, who's dressed in cargo pants and a hoodie, and he's smaller than Doug, he's slouching, and he's not looking anyone directly in the eye. He gives her Colleen the envelope with $100 in it, and he walks out. He leaves quickly. That's that. Colleen knows something's wrong. She thinks to herself, this couldn't have been Doug. The door closes, and she watches the man scurry away on the sidewalk outside the office. But if it's not Doug, who is it? Who could it possibly be? And why would Doug give this guy an envelope with $100 inside as a payment? Who pays a professional bill with cash? This just isn't right, she's thinking. Couldn't have been Doug, Colleen thinks. But if not Doug, who? And why did he come here today of all days with a $100 bill in an envelope? Well, Colleen decides that she must be wrong. Doug walks out. Maybe that is Doug, and she's just seeing things, very optical illusion or whatever. Then this guy walks out of the attorney's office, hops in his car, drives a few blocks away to a shopping mall. And there, she goes into several stores, makes some purchases, putting them on his credit cards. Doug Stewart's credit cards. If he's not Doug Stewart, he's taken his life and his credit cards and his driver's license, too, that he shows as ID when he uses the credit cards. So it's got to be Doug, right? But Venus saw Doug that same day outside her parents' home in Colon, Michigan. So how could it be Doug in Newport News, Virginia?
Let's get back to Larry McComb and Therese McComb. He's at home, and he's usually sleeping at 7:30 in the morning, but he hears the kids making a lot of noise, the girls making a lot of noise, and he wonders where Venus is because she would be taking care of the children at that time. So he wakes and looks around and can't find Venus.
Yeah, and he's not in the best mood. He's a grandfather who just got woken up by the grandkids, and he knows Venus would have kept the kids quiet for him. So he knows something's up right away. He goes into the kitchen. Venus isn't there. Well, maybe she threw a load of laundry in the washing machine. The washer dryer in her bedroom are downstairs. So Larry goes there. Neither the washer nor the dryer is running. And there's still no sign of Venus. Now Larry's getting scared because he and his wife, Therese, they know. I mean, Venus has been talking to them about her relationship with Doug, about his violence, and about her accusation of molestation. So Larry, like any father would be, is getting scared to death right now. Still no sign of Venus, and Larry's scared. Damn you, Doug, Larry thinks. Venus was finally able to get a personal protection order from a judge who listened and believed, but what good would a piece of paper do to protect his little girl against an ex-Marine, a warrior like Doug Stewart? And now Larry hates to admit it, but it looks like the worst has happened. See, not only is Venus missing, but her keys, her purse, her phone, and her children are still in the house. And on top of that, the front door is open, but Venus is nowhere to be seen. So Larry goes to the phone and calls the cops. Michigan State Police trooper by the name of Aaron Steensma, 12-year veteran of the MSP, is the first to arrive on the scene. And now Aaron, the trooper Steensma, is going to be an important player in this story down the line, too. Teresa's awake by now, Venus's mother, Larry's wife. She's hysterical. She's crying. She's nearly screaming. He took her, he took her, he took her, she tells Trooper Steensma. Larry tells the trooper Teresa's talking about Doug. They've been having problems, Larry explains, as calmly as a father can who fears the worst has happened to his child. Well, now St. Joseph County Sheriff's deputies arrive on the scene, and together with the State Trooper Steensma, they don't waste a minute. They're out looking for Venus in the yard and in the area around the home.
Now, what do Aaron Steensma and the state troopers find there? You write that there was a plastic wrapper. What was the plastic wrapper for? And what other evidence can they determine from the limited amount of evidence that they find at this crime scene by the mailbox?
They found evidence of a violent struggle by the mailbox. The ground is torn up. There are large gouges and heel marks on the lawn, like you might leave if someone was dragging you and you were resisting. A trooper spots a woman's footprint on the propane gas tank in the front yard, like you would if you were being held and you put your foot up against the tank to try to force yourself free. The torn up sections of grass, and it looks like somebody was trying to break a more muscular person's hold, the police decide, and it indicates a wild encounter between two combatants. So then the troopers and the sheriff's deputies fan out. And that plastic wrapper they found, that's a plastic cover for an all-purpose tarp, one of the brands that Walmart sells.
Yeah. Police find a neighbor who saw the truck with the out-of-state's plates parked in an empty lot next to the Macomb property. So this Doug Stewart becomes their primary suspect, doesn't he?
Right. And another witness tells police that he was stopped by a man who was soaking wet, asking for a cigarette.
Wow.
Now, Doug Stewart is their primary suspect. Troopers leading the investigation, and they know where he lives. I mean, the McCombs know where Doug has set up shop after the split with Venus. So they tell him about Newport News, Virginia. Immediately, the Michigan officers and the St. Joseph County officers call their colleagues in Newport News, Virginia. And now so they're tracking then. They realize that Doug must have come up. After the witness saw the truck, they realize he must have driven up on the turnpike. So they're talking to not only Virginia police, but Ohio police and others in Michigan. Everybody now is an all points bulletin looking for Doug Stewart and that silver Dodge Ram pickup truck. And of course, Venus Stewart. They're still holding out hope that they're going to find her alive.
Absolutely. You take us to April 28, 2010. And now back in Newport News, neighbors and friends that know Doug know something is amiss, especially a person named James Weaver. What does James Weaver specifically observe from Doug? And what does Doug have to say about Venus? Because by this time, these neighbors have heard, this is a big story, that Venus is missing.
Right. Venus is missing. Now, Doug has always talked about Venus, and every neighbor who will spend a moment with him, anybody who will listen, will hear the story from Doug about how evil Venus is, according to him. Now, this day is a warm day. Remember, we're in Virginia. It's the kind of day where, you open a pack of cigarettes and you're going to start sweating. Okay. It's warm. It's kind of humid. So everybody's in shorts and T-shirts. And this neighbor, James, that you mentioned, James, he can't help noticing there are bruises and deep red scratches on Doug's neck, on his forearms, and even on his thighs. James has to wonder, what's this guy been doing? Now, the apartment complex has heard that Venus is missing. She ran away with the girls to her parents somewhere in Michigan. Everybody knows that. And now she's gone again, but this time it's different. The news reports that have aired in Newport News, Virginia, say Venus vanished from her parents' front yard. So when Doug talks about his estranged wife, everyone's listening a bit closer now to the latest rant about Venus. It's not like anybody suspects him of anything yet. Still, James isn't the only one who notices Doug looks like he's been in a fight. They've all seen Doug around the complex every day. No way he could have been in Michigan. They saw him around the complex the day that Venus vanished. The neighbors all agree on that, except for the apartment complex's assistant manager, Catherine Roth.
Right.
Because Doug asked her just the other day about the complex's surveillance camera, wondering if somebody could get their hands on the system's videotapes. And Catherine's wondering, why would Doug want to know that? Her suspicions are aroused. And not only that, Doug isn't the only one who wants to save the complex's tapes. Catherine knows the police are suspicious of Doug, too. They've been talking to her about Doug, asking her about those tapes, and she thinks that they've even been talking to him.
You introduce Ricky Spencer now. He's 21 years old, and he had got together and met Doug through his Xbox play online. Tell us about this relationship and how it developed and who Ricky Spencer is and what's he thinking when he hears the news.
Yeah, Ricky is kind of like the beta to Doug's alpha male personality. They got together in early April 2010 during Ricky's spring break from school. And Doug tells Ricky they're more than best friends. Doug has really taken over this guy. And finally, they play games together. They hang out together. And Doug has told him the stories about Venus. He says, I don't know what I would do if she hurt those little girls. I might go on a rampage, he says. And finally he pops the question to Ricky Stewart. He said, would you help me kill Venus? You won't have to pull a trigger or even get your hands bloody, Doug assures Ricky. All you have to do is pretend to be me. And before Ricky can say no, Doug adds, it's going to be simple. You move into my apartment while I'm up in Michigan. Get into my closet, wear my clothes, go to my attorney's office, go shopping with my credit cards. It all seems like such a no-brainer. Ricky can't say no. And as a matter of fact, he's never said no to Doug about anything. The only challenging task now for Ricky will be calling Doug's parents in Michigan, pretending to be Doug. It'll be the perfect alibi, Doug assures Ricky. You do all of this and I'll drive up to Michigan to take care of business. Nothing can go wrong.
There was one thing that he didn't take care of, you write, and that was something he did every day. Tell us what he forgot to do that one day.
He forgot to call the McComb family home to talk to his kids, the girls, the daughters. Ever since Venus was awarded custody, Doug's called Larry and Therese McComb every day asking to speak with his daughters. Every day without fail. Never missed a day, except for one day, and that was the day that Venus vanished. He also made the mistake of using his credit card at that Walmart off the Ohio Turnpike. Hard to be in two places at once, and the people at Walmart remembered Doug. He bought gloves, a shovel, a tarp, and a baseball bat. And as we said earlier, he also asked them if they had any lime, something that can be used to decompose a body and mask DNA.
Tell us about these phones that were purchased as well.
Yeah. He also bought 2 Walmart track phones, burners, if you will, that he or whoever could toss. Doug uses one of the phones to call Venus, pretending to be a delivery man bringing a package to her parents' home. That was when he grabbed her. He also uses that phone to call the second burner that he bought. A call that police discovered was made to a location in Virginia near Doug's home in Newport News. Next, detectives accessed Doug's personal phone records, and guess who he's been calling quite often before Venus disappeared? None other than Ricky Spencer.
Right. So that leads police to Ricky Spencer's door, doesn't it?
Right, exactly. And Ricky's getting nervous. He knows something's going on. He's been nervous since day one, and now he's getting very nervous. And May 31, 2010, that's when they show up at his door, or they're getting closer to the door. Michigan State Police Lieutenant Mike Risco says investigators in Newport News now believe Doug Stewart was not in Virginia when Venus disappeared, and they have new evidence Doug was not inside his lawyer's office, in the shopping mall, or any place else in Newport News on April 25 or April 26. So he's learning all this, and Ricky's getting very nervous because he knows he's the guy who was pretending to be Doug.
Let's use this as an opportunity to stop for a second to hear from our sponsor. Ritual knows, as we all should know, that it's virtually impossible to get all your body's vitamin and nutrient requirements solely from the food you eat. And so Ritual has created a new multivitamin aimed at filling your body's nutrient gaps to support your overall health. What I appreciate most about Ritual is the confidence I have in the exhaustive research they undertook to create this multivitamin. Rituals Essential for Women 18 Plus is one of the few women's multis that's USP verified, meaning what's on the label is what's in the formula. It's also soy-free, gluten-free, vegan-friendly, and formulated without GMOs. A minty essence in every bottle keeps things fresh and helps make taking your multis every day actually enjoyable. Instead of striving for perfect health, aim for supporting foundational health. Great news, Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Visit ritual.com/murder to start Ritual or add Essential for Women 18 Plus to your subscription today. Now, Rod, we had this essential person crucial to this case. Ricky Spencer fell into the investigators' laps. They know that he has been impersonating, or they believe, they've talked to those women at the lawyer's office. They realize that he certainly seems to be the person impersonating Doug Stewart and doing some things on his behalf to provide for an alibi. So how do they approach him? What do they offer him? And what does he have to say to these investigators?
So what we've got now, Dan, is Ricky. They picked Ricky up, and he's in a police interrogation room, and he's talking to a couple of Michigan State police detectives, Chuck Christensen and Shane Krieger. He's trying to look relaxed and calm, but it's easy to see he's anything but at ease with these two police officers. He's scared to death. Ricky knows his future hangs in the balance. If he doesn't help the detectives, Ricky knows he'll probably be in prison for the rest of his life. But one of the officers says, "You're free to leave at any time," but he doesn't leave. He looks at from one detective to another. Krieger says there are two types of scenarios we're looking at here, and this is why we need your help. So they're playing Ricky. Okay, he wants to help them, and they're saying that he can help them. And so this is where, they know that Ricky wants to help them. They know Ricky wants to get out of here. And so they're going to offer him basically a plea deal if he starts talking. And he tells them the whole story.
He tells them the whole story, but what's important is that at first it's you have this altercation or the connection between the investigator and Ricky Spencer, and he has this realization instantly because of the question they ask. They ask, "Did you know that he was going to kill his wife?" And then he went on to tell them everything, as you said, including that how did he know that he had killed Venus? How did he know that Doug Stewart had killed his wife is also what he told them. How was that he knew?
It was he called and said, "It's done. I've killed her. That's it. It's done." That's what he said, Ricky tells the detectives. And that's how he knew Venus was dead. It's all Ricky had to hear. I asked him if it was worth it, and Doug said he did it to protect his kids and give them a future. Then he said he'd call me back because he had to bury her. Venus, we mean. And so I said, "Hey, I'm talking and I'll call you back. I've got a barrier." And that was that. So he told Ricky the whole story.
There was also a search of the vehicles and what they awaited for results from the lab, but it looked like there was blood in the truck itself and also in Doug's other vehicle.
Right. In his car. Yeah. They looked. What they had was blood in both of the cars, the vehicles, the truck and the car. And so they've got evidence and they have Ricky's story. But again, the question is, where is Venus? They still have no proof that Venus is dead even. And they've talked to Doug. He's, as nervous as Ricky was, Doug is a rock. He's still telling police he has no idea what happened to Venus. "She's my wife. I love her," Doug tells anyone who asks, including the police. And the fact is, this is still a missing person case at this point. It is not a murder case. It is not considered to be a homicide. And if it was, it would be a murder investigation going on without a body. And the thing is, nobody's using Venus's credit card. No one has seen her. What few tips that are coming into the police are going nowhere. Volunteers. Now, you have to remember, hundreds of people in Colon Township have been searching. Volunteers are searching for Venus and her body, and they still have not found any evidence of the body.
Now, you talk about the preliminary to make sure that there is enough evidence to go to trial. And at that hearing, Ricky Spencer appears, takes the witness stand, and outlines how he and Doug conspired to kill Venus. And he talks about the entire story in that hearing itself. So there certainly is enough information to take this to trial. Tell us how they proceed. And as you say, they're still searching because ideally they would really like to have the body of Venus Stewart before this trial commences. But regardless, they're going to go ahead. So two things are happening at the same time.
Right. Well, they're looking for the body. They're looking for any evidence that Venus is either alive or dead. No one can answer either question at this point, but they've taken it to trial. And in June, the judge decides there is enough evidence to prosecute Doug Stewart. So July 1st, 2010, they were in Macomb. her father yells from the witness stand when he's asked to point out Doug Stewart. He yells, "Hi, Doug. Murdered anyone lately?" Now, if the courtroom wasn't tense before that outburst, it's ready to explode now. I mean, this is just like, this courtroom is a powder keg. And when he says that like lights the fuse. And the Judge Jeff Middleton makes it clear that contempt of court is a crime, and he's not going to put up with any outbursts like that again. Prosecutors will present evidence they hope will lead the judge to rule that Doug should face trial on the charges. Now, this is the prelim in July 10th. And Ricky gets on the stand and tells the whole story about the video games and whatnot. And, they're still searching, and Doug is in jail. He's being held without bond, as is common in Michigan when you're facing a first-degree murder charge. He spent Christmas and New Year's behind bars in the county jail waiting for the trial to begin. Finally, February 21, 2011, the trial begins. And the whole case of the defense is no body has been found. The prosecution can't prove that Venus Stewart is dead. So how can they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Doug Stewart killed his wife, Venus Stewart?
You say this story goes national. It's very, very interesting and unique aspects of it, but also that you say that Therese and Larry and the family, brother Dustin, attend these hearings. What is the deal for Ricky Spencer, and how does Therese and Larry and the family feel about this?
They hate the deal. The McComb family absolutely hates the deal that Ricky gets off with a year in jail. Not prison, not state prison, but a county jail. And time served as well. So he gets off really with a heck of a deal. And they are very upset about this. As far as they're concerned, Ricky Spencer did as much to kill their daughter, Venus, as did Doug.
Now, Doug has some talented attorneys, Jeffrey and Kimberlyn Schroeder. And again, you say that their main argument was that no one's even certain that Venus was even dead. So they trot that out. But they have to contend with Doug's fingerprints on that tarp wrapper. And what the prosecutor McDonough says is basically overwhelming evidence. Give us a little bit of the overwhelming evidence, including the receipt that was found in the truck for the tarp and the shovel and all of the things used to bury Venus.
Yeah. And, the tarp wrapper with Doug's fingerprints on it, his defense attorney contends they should not surprise anybody. They admit that Doug bought the tarp at the Walmart off the Ohio Turnpike, but they remind the jury the tarp was what they call a movable object, and Doug's fingerprints were found nowhere else on the McComb property. That fingerprint proves he held the tarp packaging, his attorney Jeffrey Schroeder said. That doesn't necessarily mean that he was there at Driftwood Drive. It only proves that the tarp packaging he held at one point was there. So, you touch the tarp packaging, but it's movable. It could have come from anywhere, they're saying. It doesn't prove he was there. However, the jury, or McDonough the prosecutor told the jury in his closing statement, the evidence and testimony from the police task force proves beyond a reasonable doubt that not only was Venus murdered, but that only one person could be responsible for her death, and that was Doug Stewart, he argued. The prosecutor argued it was illogical to believe that Venus is still alive. However, he couldn't prove that he was dead.
So the jury deliberates for 4 hours only, which is an indication not good for the defendant. What is the verdict?
The verdict is guilty. Guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. As you said, it was a 4-hour deliberation, so this is going to be bad for him. Doug took the verdict stoically. There's barely a flicker of emotion on Doug's face as the guilty verdicts are read. Now he's going to prison for the rest of his life unless his attorneys win on appeal. There's no question about that. But still the question remains, where is Venus Stewart? Outside the courtroom, Therese and Venus's older brother, Dustin, are surrounded by reporters. Venus was an awesome person, Therese says. I just hope Venus sees some of what's going on. Dustin replies, she does, Mom. She does.
Let's use this as an opportunity to stop for a second for these messages. Now, in the sentencing, now the family that has endured this horrible trial and the testimony and hearing the details of this murder conspiracy, these people now get to make their impact statements. And also on that sentencing day, Doug Stewart makes a statement. So tell us about Doug Stewart's statement, the gist of it, and You say there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom that day with those impact statements.
Yeah, Doug says I'm innocent. Doug is not admitting that he's guilty. He says, I did not do these crimes. All I have to say is I am innocent. I asked the police to continue to look for my wife. If not for me, my children. They need to know what happened to their mother. Then the convicted killer sits quietly, expressionless, as Venus's family gets their chance to talk, and no one wants to miss a word of that. Even after all this stuff, Venus's brother Dustin says, I do forgive Doug for what he has done. Could it be true that Dustin has found forgiveness in his heart for the man who killed his sister? The answer is yes. But Dustin also has a request. He asks Doug to please reveal where Venus's body is buried. It's not too late to do the right thing, Dustin says. Doug sits quietly through that. If Doug is to maintain his claim of innocence, how could he help find the body of the woman he didn't murder? Finally, Judge Stutzman passes the sentence. As expected, Doug will spend the rest of his life in prison. Later, outside the courtroom, Therese tells reporters she knows her daughter's dead and knows who killed her. There is no doubt in my mind, Therese says. Nobody else would harm her. Everybody loved her. But she doesn't understand why Doug can't confess to the murder, or why he did not confess to the murder. Everyone knows he did it, she says. Why can't he tell us where he left the dead body of his wife, my daughter, Venus? I don't understand how he can't be thinking about that. I know she's out there somewhere buried. I hope Doug would tell us, but I don't think he wants to give up that power. For him to do this greatly hurts me, Dustin says. I don't know what I or my family has done to Doug to deserve this. Therese and Dustin then tell reporters they plan to hold a memorial service for Venus in 8 days on April 26th, which will be the first anniversary of her disappearance. Therese also says she wants a funeral for Venus, even if there are no remains to bury. Just because her body isn't here doesn't mean she's not here, Therese says. And Dustin stresses that the search for Venus will continue. Nothing, he says, will stop our family and the people that love us and care for us from finding her.
In that continued search, you write about July 9, 2011. It looks like a promising development in the case, potentially. A small game hunter in southeastern Kalamazoo County in this Fulton State game area, he was checking the photos on his trail camera, and it looked like it might be a human body. So he called 911, and then there was a 5-person task team from Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office met up with the Michigan State Police detectives, and they went there with a dog. What was the results?
They know there's no hope of finding her alive. They're looking for the body right now. So they bring a dog train to find dead bodies, cadavers. They found nothing. There was no evidence of a body there, no evidence of a tarp there. So it was just another dead end. They found nothing. Well, Doug is in jail, saying again that he did, or in prison rather, saying again that he did not kill his wife. They didn't find a scrap of evidence out there.
Yeah. You're right that Dateline NBC was going to do a 90-minute story about the case in a few days, and authorities were hopeful that there would be some fresh leads as a result. But on July 11th, 2011, the Kalamazoo Gazette receives a letter with someone claiming that they have intimate knowledge about this Venus's disappearance. Who is this letter from? Who do they find?
Yeah, the letter is from none other than Doug Stewart. He writes to the Kalamazoo Gazette saying that he knows who murdered Venus. So he knows, he says, that Venus is dead. And now he says he knows who murdered her. And guess who he fingers for this?
Right.
Ricky Spencer.
Oh, yeah.
Ricky Spencer. He fingers him, okay? Doug writes, I did not kill my wife, nor did I conspire to kill her. I have and forever do love my wife. Ricky's testimony, he writes, was completely false. Knowing this, I truly believe he must know where my wife currently is. If Ricky is allowed to serve a 1-year cap, you will forever hide the truth that Venus, her family, my children, and I so desperately need. I come to you as a desperate husband and father of 2 beautiful little girls that need their mother. Please encourage and convince Ricky to tell you where my wife is.
And the story continues with another strange twist. October 4th, 2012, Teresa McComb is flying to Los Angeles to be on the Dr. Phil show along with a famed psychic named John Edward. It would seem that she would try anything to be able to locate her daughter's body and cooperate with someone like Dr. Phil and this John Edward. How does this whole thing turn out?
Terribly. It just goes terribly. You know, before the interview, she said, I'm desperate to find her body and have closure. This is about a desperate mother. That's what this is. And she's willing to do anything to find Venus's body. Well, the TV show goes terribly. You know, she's figuring that if John Edwards, the psychic, can't find Venus's body, then no one will. But the Dr. Phil show for her turns out to be a complete waste of time. Dr. Phil adds that he says that Therese has an addiction. Teresa's obsession with Venus's murder and the fact that her daughter's body was still missing, lying somewhere lost and alone. She needs to let it go, Dr. Phil says. They also have another psychic on the show, and Colette Baron Reed. They all pile on and criticize Therese for her quest to find Venus. They all say that they need to give up on this, to let it go. And Therese just can't. She will not.
She's not so determined to give up. And so November 1st, 2016, you write that Therese and the family hire a private investigator. But now lead us all the way to September 4th, 2017. Doug is sitting in state prison. Finally, there seems to be that he wants to cooperate. And does he? Or what does he have to say?
He does, but you know who he confesses to? Channel 3, WWMT-TV,
sure.
Which is Channel 3 in Kalamazoo. He talks to a reporter, and he says that, yes, I killed Venus. He makes his confession on camera. He says, you remember everything. I remember the smells, everything, Doug says, of killing his wife. I think about it every single second. And now the world knows. But still, he refuses to tell us where Venus is buried, or to tell Therese or anyone else where Venus is buried. Around Christmas time, though, maybe it's Christmas time that got to him. And there was a rumor, too, that he was given a Nintendo machine as a deal, a Nintendo video game as a deal. But I wasn't really able to confirm that, so I left that out of the story. But somehow he decides he's ready to talk. He's ready to lead police to Venus's body. October 22nd, 2018, we've got Chuck Christensen, the Michigan State Police First Lieutenant, and MSP Sergeant Todd Peterson. They've been working on this case, too, on their own time, pretty much, trying to find the answers to where is Venus. Well, now, Doug says he will lead them, and he leads them off into the woods. The trio drives down a muddy, wet two-track path. And they're not totally sure that Doug is telling the truth. He might just be an inmate who looks at this as a chance to get out in the fresh air for a while out of his jail cell, okay? But they drive down, he leads them down a muddy, wet two-track path cut through the middle of the woods by farmers' trucks near South 42nd and East U Avenue. And they're about 20 miles southeast of Kalamazoo now, 12 miles north of the McComb family home when Doug tells the troopers to stop. They're close. Now, Doug, remember, it's 8 years ago this happened. He starts walking through the woods, through the mud. He says, though, they shouldn't have any problem finding the grave. He dug only a shallow pit for his wife's dead body, and he set 3 tree stumps on the site. So if he could see it again, kind of like a makeshift grave marker if he needed to go back there. He tells the troopers, even though he was shoveling dirt on her dead body, he didn't want to forget where he buried Venus. Well, they do find the gravesite, and only 2 of the 3 stumps are left, but, so this is 3,101 days after the search began for Venus. They find Venus Stewart's remains. They're taken to Western Michigan University School of Medicine, and there the remains are identified, and they'll be released to Venus's family in a few weeks.
They also find the tarp, don't they?
Right. They did find the tarp as well. They found the tarp near the place where Doug said he buried the body. And the MSP says it does match the tarp that Doug bought the day before Venus was murdered. It feels good in that our hope was always just to give her a proper burial and provide some comfort to the family, Lieutenant Christensen says. The criminal case was done. There's nothing more that was going to happen, but we felt we needed to do this to finally close out this case.
Now, Therese and the family, the brother Dustin, got to hear that her body was finally found and that her daughters would have a place to mourn, as Therese had described it. But Larry McComb didn't get to see this. Tell us what happened with Larry McComb.
Yeah, Larry McComb died of cancer on July 9th, 2017. So he went to his grave, not knowing for sure what had happened to his daughter, Venus.
And you say, too, that he spent his last year searching for Venus's body.
Right. Yeah, he spent the last year searching for the body, and he was 61 when he died. And Therese today, as the story goes, when they're laying Venus to rest next to Larry, she feels better. It means a lot, Therese says, because I can go take care of her stone and everything. Venus already had her stone, but when she wasn't there, it didn't, what did it mean? So she wanted to have her daughter's remains buried there. You've got to go on, she says. now, Therese for the past year has been faced with getting out of bed every day, knowing that her husband is dead and not knowing actually what happened to her daughter. You got to get it together. You keep it together, Therese says. You've got to take care of the girls and make their life happy. And that's what Venus wants. Venus wants those girls to live a normal life like everyone else does. I'm just glad I have the girls because they fill my life a lot. And December 15th, 2018, Venus was finally laid to rest in a graveside service at Leonda Cemetery next to Larry McComb's body, about 2 miles from her home.
And Doug Stewart remains in prison.
Yep, Doug Stewart remains in prison. He'll be there for the rest of his life.
I want to thank you very much, Rod Kackley, for coming on and talking about your Never Forgive, Never Forget, a shocking true crime story. For those that might want to take a look, do you have a website or do any social media other than Amazon page? We can find all of your work.
Right. Yeah. Amazon is a good way to go. This book is available wherever books are sold, and you can always go to my website at rodkackley.com or the Facebook. I have a Facebook page as well, but rodkackley.com is probably the best way to go.
Thank you so much, Rod Kackley. Never Forgive, Never Forget, a shocking true crime story. It's been a fascinating interview. Thank you so much. You have a great evening. Good night.